fans, my name is Taylor, and welcome back to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk all about the NASCAR Cup Series. We had the Pocono Doubleheader this week in another SRX race, and we're going to talk about it today with first-time guest on the show, Justin Seger. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. My fellow co-host has been on a few times, so I had to catch up with him.
Yeah, Justin is from Racing Refresh over at Dipstick Debates. Zachary Bell, a longtime co-host of the show. They're buddies. They do the show together. Is there anything else the viewers should know a little bit more about you, Justin, before we roll into the race today?
Well, the term buddies for me and Zach is a little far-fetched. You know, sometimes we give each other a little more crap than we should. But yeah, other than that, I'm a junior at going to be a senior at Mississippi State, majoring in communications, and I've just always loved NASCAR, so it's fun to be here.
Awesome. Yeah. Communications, journalism, PR over here. A good match. And I would say, debates is in your name, the name of your show. So there's a lot of debates going on over there. So fun show. Definitely make sure you check it out. We'll talk a little bit more about it at the end of the show. But right now, let's dive right in to the Camping World SRX Series. There was absolutely nothing to complain about there while they went to Eldora, my home state in Ohio. A great race, and here is your top lineup. Here we have Tony Stewart, aka Smoke. He stole the show at his pretty much home track. It's his track. And then in second place, we had hometown hero Cody Swanson. Right behind him was Helio Castroneves. I was pretty shocked by that. This year's Indy 500 winner. You will notice, again, Bill Elliott finishes last. That poor guy just has no luck whatsoever. And Justin, what I found so entertaining about this race were a few things I wanted to get your opinions on. First and foremost, this is the first time in the series we saw a combo of Alan Bestwick and James Hinchcliffe in the booth. And before I give my opinions on the broadcast, because it's all positive things, I want to ask you how you like that combo, what you think went well, what you think they could have done better, if anything.
I really enjoyed the combination of Alan Bestwick and James Hinchcliffe. I thought James did a really good job. Danica, to me, nothing against Danica, but she just seemed like she was having a little bit too much fun with the broadcast. Okay. And James Hinchcliffe seemed like he brought an element of fun, but he also kept it professional. And of course, Alan Bestwick just does an incredible job. One thing that impressed me was, I believe, for the first time ever in racing history, we had a live green flag talk to a driver.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to mention that too, and I was questioning this week. I was like, was that the first time? But yeah, and of course, Tony Stewart handled it like a champ. It would have been nobody else, and he was cool as a cucumber. I was pretty shocked by that, and I thought, same with you, Justin. It was a beautiful combination. James added an element to it, and I hope he's in a booth somewhere at some point in his career, like after he retires from driving full time or whatever that may be. He belongs in the booth, and I think he added really tasteful commentary and really like a lot of good insight as well from that. So a very good combination. I wish it was the rest of the season. Of course, we're halfway through the SRX season. It's a 6-race series. Hopefully next season we get some more races. Do you want more races in the series? Do you think we're going to go back next year?
I do think we're going to go back next year. I would love to see more races because I think this kind of racing is just fun to watch. I wouldn't go any more than 10 races, though. I think, too much of a good thing could be a little overkill.
Mm-hmm. I think any more than 10 is too much. And I would say, I don't know, and it does kind of take the fun out of it. I know for NASCAR in particular, we're NASCAR fans, but 36 races can be a little lengthy. I know I've had talks with other fans outside of the podcast about maybe do we shorten the season a little bit, shorten the race length, and we'll talk about the race lengths in a little bit. But another thing I wanted to mention with the SRX Series too is there's excitement starting with rivalries. We have, I think, Paul Tracy versus the whole field at this point, honestly. I don't know if there's any other rivalries that kind of caught your eye or any driver you really enjoy kind of seeing getting fired up again behind the wheel.
No, Paul Tracy versus the field pretty much has that covered. I've been enjoying watching it. It's interesting because I didn't expect this series to have a lot of rivalries, and it seems like we're getting kind of playful rivalries. It's not like NASCAR where these guys are going to get out of the car and fight each other. Just more like, hey, we're having fun with each other.
Right. There's no big high stakes, and I hate to say that because, of course, for these drivers, I mean, it's a championship on the line in some respects. So it's a lot of fun, and I think the moral of the story is even with heated discussions and rivalries, these drivers are having a blast, and it shows to the fans, and it's fun all the way around. So that's a short conclusion of the SRX series discussion. Of course, we'll be going back on the track again this weekend, Saturday at Lucas Oil Raceway in Indianapolis on July 3rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. But that's all about the SRX. We got to move into the doubleheader this weekend, the Cup Series at Pocono. And Justin and I are going to break down the action at Pocono Organics CBD 325. And now we're going to go to the Exploring the Pocono Mountains 350. I would say a tale of two races. We saw quite different things in both. And for Pocono, I'm a little shocked about it. But that was not a bad thing. So let's line up your field for race one of the weekend with Kyle Larson winning the pole. No surprise with that. And the only driver to the rear of this race was Cole Custer. And now for the result. A result that nobody saw coming. Alex Bowman hints the hat today. Or I should say Bowman the Bandit, coined by Zachary Bell, actually, was like, we're going to call him Bowman the Bandit now. I like the nickname. Stole the show in the last few laps. And Larson, we'll get to that, but he lost the wheel or a tire on the final turn of Pocono. It was devastating, but we'll get to the top 10 first. We had Bowman, Kyle Busch, William Byron, Hamlin, Blaney, Kurt Busch, Logano, Harvick, Larson, and Keselowski. Still managed to get a top 10. So before we pick our driver inside the top 10 that we want to kind of discuss farther, because there's a few good ones in there, we have to address the elephant in the room here. The last lap, Kyle Larson overtook teammate Alex Bowman for the lead with 4 laps to go. And then the last lap, middle of turn 3, blew a tire, leading the race. And of course, no matter what, this was still the 6th consecutive win for Hendrick Motorsports. But Justin, what was your reaction at home? I knew I sat up, I was screaming at my TV, couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Yeah, my reaction was pretty much Alex Bowman's when he got out of the car. I don't think anybody saw that coming. And I think it was just the way that Kyle lost the race that was shocking to me.
Yeah, it was pretty devastating, I would say. And, we talk about Kyle Larson a lot, and we didn't expect it. Nobody saw it coming. I kind of packed my bags and left for the day. I was like, oh, he wins. He's good. I sent out a tweet. I was like, look at the post regarding my last race winner. But no, I mean, that kind of just goes to prove it's not over until it's over. But, we talked about the top 2. Let's talk about a driver that we want to talk about inside the top 10, whether for better or worse. So, Justin, I'm going to ask you first before I kind of go on a tangent here about the driver I want to talk about. But what was your driver in the top 10 that either impressed you, didn't impress you, or that you just want to mention?
Well, for me, the one inside the top 10 was Kevin Harvick. He actually is looking stronger than, and I think a lot of that goes back to last season with how well he did. But he's been putting together a solid season, and Pocono we knew would be a good track for him, and I think it was worth noting that he did well.
I think too. I actually just saw a fact on Twitter. I'll put the link in the bio if I remember to look for it. But he's actually tied for top 10s with William Byron and I think Kyle Larson, I believe is what I saw. And kind of looking at his season as a whole, it's unbelievable because we haven't talked about him a lot this year. We've kind of talked about how he has struggled. I've talked about how he struggled, but I would say at Pocono, a track that he's good at, he did pretty decently well this weekend. My driver, I would say, did decently well was Kurt Busch in race number 1. And I want to pull the point standings on the screen for you because he closed the gap. He is now 4 points to the good inside the cutoff line in place 16 in the standings for the playoffs. And I mean, he's doing better and better each week. And I'm going to mention again, Chip Ganassi Racing as a whole doing better and better each week as well. He's consistent. He got stage points in both stages in the race, and he got stage points last weekend. So it's a good progression for Kurt Busch going into the playoffs, and I hope he can hang on to it. I think he can. I think, in my opinion, the playoff field is set as it is, but as we know, there's a lot of mystery tracks. We have Road America coming up. We got the Daytona still. It's 7 races to go in the regular season. There is still a lot of racing to go, but I think Kurt Busch could be set. But let's talk about drivers now outside the top 10, going beyond, starting with drivers that I think disappointed us, because I don't like to leave off on a bad note. So let's start with the negatives. Which driver disappointed you?
Well, as much as it kills me to say this, my own driver, MTJ.
Oh no, the hat.
Yeah, I know. He had a disappointing run. He's had a lot of disappointing runs lately, and aside from that Sonoma top 3, it's just been a rough summer season for him, completely different than the way he started the season. So I think the 19 team needs to turn something around figure something out and get ready for the playoffs.
Absolutely. And in my opinion, I love Alex Bowman. He's one of my favorite drivers. But if Alex Bowman now has 3 wins, Martin Truex Jr. has 3 wins, Alex Bowman's been able to catch up, whether it's stealing wins or whatever. That's an alarm bell in my head going off for Martin Truex Jr. And I talked about him being my disappointment last weekend at Nashville. I was shocked. It was like he was a back of the pack team. So they do seem to be missing the mark, and I would say they got to kick it in gear. My driver that disappointed me, and I hate to say this driver again because this was also one of my drivers last week, Matt DiBenedetto. And I hate it. I do because I love Matt, but I don't know what's happening over there. We knew they changed crew chiefs for the All-Star race and the rest of the season, but I figured they'd be picking up some slack right now. But I do say I'm probably going to retract this because the next Pocono race he did significantly better. But still, I'd like to see more from Matt DiBenedetto. We don't really know his future right now. We'll talk about that in the next podcast, what we think will be happening at Penske for the pre-show of Road America, where Justin will be back. But still, I'm not sure what's happening with Matt DiBenedetto right now. I hope he can pick it up. But let's pick up the pace here. Talk about drivers that impressed us. And Justin, I know who you picked for this, and I was about to pick the same driver because I'm still every week impressed.
Yeah, Daniel Suarez. I think Trackhouse in general has proven that they can take a new team and they can get top 10 finishes out of it. They can get solid finishes. I don't know if they're a playoff team yet, but if they consistently improve, I think next year they could very well be maybe not a championship threat, but definitely a playoff threat.
Absolutely. I won't go on my high horse about Daniel Suarez. It's you don't see a new team coming into the series like this and doing so well. It's kind of unheard of, so it makes me question what he can do in the future. And hopefully this is momentum that will pick up and not fall back as we go into the playoffs in next season. My driver, I've got a hero card of him behind me. I'm going to talk about Tyler Reddick a lot this weekend, or talking about this weekend, but it's Tyler Reddick. He is a future championship driver at work here. I'm sure of it. And he was just outside the top 10, finishing in position at number 11. He's just so good week after week, and I hate how hard he is on himself. I don't know if you listen to the in-car radios during the race or after the race, but he's constantly like, I don't know where my brain went, like I did horrible, and he finishes like right outside the top 10 or inside. And like I get you got to be hard on yourself. Sometimes it's a good thing, but I'm like, dude, like he's doing so well. But just to say, I think Tyler Reddick is going to do really, really well the rest of this season, and he's certainly improving week after week. And he has a lot of top 10s. Actually, the top 10s that he has right now in the season, like not even the middle of the season, sort of middle of the season right now, matches what he had combined as a total last season. So significant progress over at RCR. Very exciting stuff. Before we move on to race 2, we're going to put this race above or below the yellow line. Justin, just so you know how this works. A 50% on the line is kind of like mediocre. It was okay. Above the yellow line is what we want. That's a good race. Below the yellow line means it kind of sucked. But I don't get the impression that we thought that any racing this weekend was bad. So I'm going to ask you for your first race rating of the weekend.
I never thought I'd say this about a Pocono race. I'm going to give it a 95%. It's one of the best races. Yeah, it's one of the best races I've watched this season. And as we'll see a little bit later, I put the second race fairly high as well. So I didn't expect this good a racing at a Pocono, to be honest, but I enjoyed the weekend a lot.
I would say I didn't expect this good of racing either. And I think what's going to be interesting about our ratings here is we kind of flipped how we viewed them a little bit. This race rating was a little lower for me for the kind of idea that there wasn't a lot of passing. And what I did really like, we weren't sure who was going to win the race. Even at the end, I kind of threw in the towel. I will admit, I already admitted I thought Larson was going to win. And not that that should affect my rating, but, you know, when you have a driver like so dominant, it's kind of like, why am I watching this race sometimes for me? But still, like, you know, we didn't know who was going to win the race. There was a lot of lead changes, but there was still kind of issues with passing. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 75%. That might be a little low for me now. I might change it in the future. I know that's how I work. I change things in the future, but I feel like that seems fair. But now we're going to go like a little deja vu moment. Let's line up the field again for Exploring the Pocono Mountains 350. And with this race, just so the viewers at home know, and you probably already know, the top 20 finishing order for the first race, the field was inverted. So Alex Bowman would start P20, and the P20 guy, which was Christopher Chris Buescher, will be on the pole for this race. And the drivers to the rear, we know that there was a lot of carnage in the first Pocono race, a lot of single car spins, a lot of tires going down, a lot of just kind of chaos. So we had a total of 8 cars to the rear of the field. No surprise, Kyle Larson was one of them. He tore up his car on that last lap. And then we had Priest, Alfredo, Chastain, LaJoie, who had extensive damage on their cars due to spins, and then Newman and Custer, who were taken out of the race. And finally, mentioning a driver change here. I don't know, Justin, if you saw the Xfinity race. I'm assuming you did, but Justin Haley had quite a hard hit. It was pretty scary, knocked the wind out of him, and out of an abundance of caution, he was supposed to race in the Spire Motorsports number 77, but Justin Allgaier, another Justin, took his place, and he did pretty well for the team, so we're hoping Justin Haley is good now. He seems to be fine. Very scary, though, but that's the lineup. Justin, we're going to bring you back in to talk about these. I don't even know how to quantify this result, but Kyle Busch somehow struggled the entire day with a vehicle stuck in 4th gear, and my goodness, he won the race. And it seemed impossible, but he made it possible with true grit, determination, and a winning just fuel strategy, and Kyle Busch seemed to put it together, and he breaks the 6 points race victory at Hendrick Motorsports. I figured he would be the guy to do it, and honestly, I feel like he excels in the face of just absolute crap. Like, I don't know what it is, but I want to ask you, Justin, like, what was your mindset going into this race for Kyle Busch? Because at one point, they even said, take him out of your fantasy lineup. He's not worth it anymore when he came into pit. But, like, what was your take watching this race, looking at Kyle Busch?
I was a little upset in my lineup. I did take him, so I didn't get any fantasy points for that. I was upset, but I was very surprised to see Kyle actually. I don't know why. If anybody can take a beat up car and win with it, it's Kyle Busch.
Absolutely. I mean, we all know every weekend he's on the radio. He's like, my car is crap. This sucks. And he still manages to pull it off. I was lucky. I had him in my fantasy lineup. I just had him in the garage. And by the point I changed it, there was no returning from it. So I got a few points, not as much as I would have liked to, though. But, I mean, in the fuel strategy race, too, I mean, we saw drivers that could have won. William Byron was my winning pick for this race. And he was close, but not close enough. He didn't save enough fuel in time. We had Denny Hamlin, who could have won another race. His first race of the season, have to pit on the final lap. We had Kurt Busch, who was said to have a top 5 finish, have to pit. But the rest of the top 10 are as follows. We have Kyle Larson in 2nd place, and then the catbird seat of Kyle Busch ran out of gas. Then we have Keselowski, Harvick, Wallace, Blaney, Bowman, Reddick, Priest, and Logano. First off, inside that top 10, we have some pretty exciting names in there. There are 2 to 3 drivers I know that Justin and I wanted to mention. So I want to start by giving my driver, Tyler Reddick. I mentioned him in the first Pocono race. I keep mentioning him week after week because he continues to be very impressive. I mentioned that he has basically gone over his top 10 limit from last season. So just another impressive drive from him. And then there's 2 drivers that I know Justin really wanted to talk about. And I would definitely want to talk about them a little bit too. But I'm going to give Justin the floor here talking about the impressive drive from Ryan Preece this weekend.
Yeah, Ryan Preece just continues to impress in the second JTG Doherty car. It's uncharted. He has to qualify in on the races where we have qualifying, and the races we don't. We know that JTG doesn't have the equipment that some of the top tier teams do, and he's outperforming it, really. Ryan Preece just consistently proves how good of a driver he is.
Absolutely. And even the truck race from Nashville, even too, he impressed me there. And I mean, we don't see him winning in the Cup Series, and just seeing that he's still able to win in a truck that he has never driven before. It was his Truck Series debut. It was very impressive. And then finally in the top 10, the last impressive driver that we have to talk about, Bubba Wallace getting his first top 5, let alone top 10 for the 2311 racing team, the brand new team led by Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin. Justin, what are your thoughts on this? This was pretty exciting for all the fans at home.
Yeah, it was really impressive to see Bubba Wallace up in the top 5. Granted, some fuel strategy came into that, but it's a top 5 nonetheless, and it's got to be really good momentum for the team. Michael Jordan being there makes it all the more sweeter. Bubba Wallace is honestly, I really kind of put him subpar to Daniel Suarez for the large majority of the team, or of the season anyway. But I'm really impressed by him at Pocono.
I do want to touch on your point there where you said it was pretty much a fuel strategy. They had the right strategy, and nevertheless it was a win. I would agree with that. It might not have been the type of win that we kind of expect or would like to see from that team, but at the end of the day, we saw, like I mentioned before, like Denny Hamlin, he could have gotten the win, but he lost out on the last lap due to fuel. We saw Kurt Busch, who could have gotten the top 5. Like, mentioned all those names before, but still, Bubba Wallace was able to play the game, and they played it really well, getting him his first top 5. And I do hope this is good momentum, just like you, Justin. I hope this carries them into the next week and the rest of the season doing very well. So that is inside the top 10, leaving it off with Bubba Wallace and his impressive top 5 finish. Now let's go outside the top 10, looking at drivers that either disappointed us or impressed us yet again. And we're going to go to Justin for the first driver disappointment of the weekend.
Well, I'm really sorry to do this to you, Taylor, but I'm going to have to go with Chase Elliott for race 2. He just, to me, I saw, of course, Alex Bowman, he won the first race. Kyle Larson was running up front both races. William Byron did really well in race 2. And besides a little bit in the first race, I just didn't see a whole lot out of Chase Elliott this weekend. Certainly not what I expect to see out of him at this point in his career.
Yeah, I honestly, if you were going to choose Chase Elliott, I was, and it does pain me a little bit, but he wasn't impressive this weekend, and I'm a little concerned for that team. The run that he had this week and last week is going to have him in a really horrible starting position for the next week or two if he can't get it back up. Of course, we're going to a road course next week, which could play in his favor, but yet again at COTA, he got very lucky. I didn't think he was going to win the race, but it was a strategy play against the rain. So not this season I'm wanting for Chase Elliott. I'm not going to push the panic button on him yet, though. I don't think that we should quite yet. He's a second half of the season driver, but still compared to his teammates that are fairly young and new in the Cup Series, there is a little bit of concern. A driver that is my disappointment is a driver I'm actually going to start pressing the panic button on, and that is Denny Hamlin. And I hate to say it because I like all these drivers. I like Denny Hamlin. He was so close to a win, but yet again, played the game wrong. And also, I mean, they've just been off this season. And he started off really well, and then he's just slowly kind of declined, and Kyle Busch has risen to the top at Joe Gibbs Racing. So I really don't know what to say. Justin, would you agree it's time to press the panic button for Denny Hamlin, or are you holding off hope?
I'm going to hold off on that a little bit for Denny Hamlin. I don't think it's quite time to press the panic button. And for the simple reason of, even though it's only 2 points, he is still currently the points leader. And the reason I'm not hitting the panic button yet is that Denny Hamlin is probably the most experienced driver in the Cup Series today that does not have a championship. And I think that team has a lot behind it. They do need at least one win before the playoffs, though.
I would say that's a must at this point for any driver that's in the playoffs right now that doesn't have a win. You got to get the win to get in. It's got to be that guaranteed. And though at this point, Denny Hamlin is guaranteed in by points, by a large margin of points. Like you said, it's slimming down though. Still, I think it would be nice to see a win from Denny Hamlin, but that's the negative. Let's go to the positive with drivers outside the top 10 that actually impressed us. And Justin, I would agree with your pick here as well, just like last race.
Yeah, I went with Michael Mcdowell on this one. We haven't seen a whole lot from Michael since the Daytona 500 and the Daytona Road Course. He did perform well at Homestead, but since then he's kind of slipped back where we expect the 34 team to be. But, he's still hovering around 16th, 17th in points. He's kind of proving why they deserve to be in the playoffs, at least, be considered for it.
Yeah, and I would say I think the funding too from that Daytona 500 win really did help the team get some better equipment as well. But he's hanging in there. I'm pretty impressed that he's able to still hang on to that and not show that the Daytona 500 was a fluke by no means. Another driver I would say impressed me, and one that I actually really don't talk about, whether either at all or a lot on the show, would be Austin Dillon. And this kind of goes back to talk about even Tyler Reddick. That team is just firing on all cylinders. They're doing very well. I feel like Tyler Reddick is having a little bit more success this season than Austin Dillon is, but the cars continue to improve every week, and Austin Dillon has 6 top 10s this season and finished this race 13th, so he's not completely consistent yet. He's been like 20th and 13th and top 10, and it's kind of all over the place, but still, like, it's still a really good day for that team. And I see them doing pretty decently in the playoffs. If not making it to the halfway point in the playoffs, at least making it past the first round, I think, for that team. So I think they have a good shot, if any. So we talked about the top 10. We've talked about both races. Now it's time to go down the line discussing some key moments and questions of this race. And I got 3 questions. Justin, we talked about the disasters at the end of these races, losing to fuel or losing to a blown tire. And a question actually asked by NASCAR on their YouTube page was, which is more devastating, blowing a tire on the final lap or running out of fuel on the final lap? And I'm curious to know your answer, Justin, because this wasn't a completely like black and white answer. And I know a lot of people chose what I don't think I would have chosen.
Well, I chose what a lot of people chose. I would rather blow a tire, simply for the fact that that's not something that happens every day. We see a lot of fuel mileage races. They happen a little bit less than they used to, but they still occur. We talk about, can a driver make it to the end on fuel? And, blowing a tire is just something that doesn't happen. I mean, as tough as it is for Kyle Larson, that's something that can be a freak accident, something like that. So I would say I'd rather blow a tire.
I can't be half and half on this because it's either or. Both would be horrible to happen, but I think I'm in the same boat as you a little bit, because at least blowing a tire you don't see coming. Like, you don't see disaster waiting to strike, and that can almost be like, why am I racing anyways to the finish? So kind of losing fuel for me would be a little bit more devastating, but at the same time, you're seeing that finish line, you're in first, you're like miles ahead of the guy in second, and then you blow a tire and you see it just slip away right then and there. It's a bit shocking. It has to set in a little bit, but I think I would agree with you, Justin, that I think maybe blowing a tire would be a little bit better than sitting there and waiting for your doom. Let's talk about the race length as a second moment in all of this. Do we like the length of these races? I think I like the first length, even though it felt a little short to me, the 325, more than I like the 350. But I think we got to say it's so much better than the 400 races that we used to have at Pocono.
I think the 325 and the 350 was good for the double headers. Obviously, I don't think they could do 2 400-mile races back to back. That would be an absolute strain on the drivers. For a race that's not a double header, I would still rather it be longer. But for double header weekends, I'm fine with the 325 and the 350.
And then I think, too, another question I wanted to ask now that I'm thinking about it is, for me, in my opinion, and I know a lot of people differ from this, I think most of the races should be kept under 400 miles or even 375. And I know 375 is really pushing it to a shorter race, except for Crown Jewels, which we know we have the Coca-Cola 600, we have the Daytona 500. I want to ask you if you agree with that.
I don't agree with that. And this is kind of the old school, I guess, in me. I enjoy races that are 500 miles and even 400 miles. I don't mind having having them scattered. Some are above 400, some are below 400. Obviously, the crown jewels need to stay where they are in length, but I mean, I think it's a great. I think the way NASCAR has it now is a great mix.
Mix.
Good balance. I like the lengths that they have for the races. I like longer lengths. I think it allows for more strategy and obviously more racing for the fans. So.
Yeah, I would say for me, even though, like I mentioned, I think the Pocono 325 felt a little too short for me. Like, it was kind of compacted, but I did really like it. And I would say, there's a lot of difference between the old school way of thinking and like the new school, or like the new kid in the town, new kid on the block, thinking about NASCAR. But, I respect that. I respect liking longer races. And there's some tracks I do like the longer races at, and some tracks I'm like, we either shouldn't or we should shorten it. But I asked you all on Twitter some of the same questions, and here are some of your responses, what you had to say regarding the SRX race that we talked about earlier. Alex Knapp, I hope I'm saying your name right, said, this has probably been my favorite race so far, even with Heat 2 being a little rough. And I would agree. It was my favorite SRX race of the season so far, and a proud Ohioan moment for me to have a good race and a good racetrack in Ohio. My good friend Adam Lucas on the show, who was on the show last week, or I guess 2 weeks in a row, gave this race a rating of 78 out of 100. And then the second race that we're talking about now, an 82 out of 100, saying passing is so hard at this track with the package. I think 2022 Pocono Doubleheader will be better than we've seen in the past few seasons. Good races this weekend and a great job by track management preparing the double and knocking it out of the park. I absolutely agree with that. He continues to say he loved how the late race drama led to a surprise win, while the other race had differing strategies on fuel mileage as a factor. Two more comments to get through. Another good friend of mine, Dom Joseph, commented, say what you want, fuel mileage racing is entertaining. And finally, from the comments on Twitter, we had Jeffrey. He said, this is way after the fact, but my heavens, what a race it was. I was thrilled to be there in the grandstands again. Lucky you. I wish I was there. I thought it was a good race. And thank you all again for sharing your thoughts on Twitter. Of course, go to my Twitter page, and I'll have daily questions and weekly questions up for you all to share your thoughts on the race, and I love sharing them on the show. But those were your thoughts. Justin, I got to get to your thought on Pocono race number 2 for rating it above or below the yellow line yet again. Justin, what would you rate this race and why?
Once again, it was a great race. I'm gonna stick with the very optimistic point of above 90%. I'm gonna go with a 92%. It was just slightly worse in my opinion than the first race. I think, like you said earlier, we had 2 completely different races for only a 25-mile difference, but it was enjoyable. I enjoyed both races, and the second race was, while slightly worse, I very much enjoyed it, and I did not expect that from Pocono.
Yeah, I didn't think I expected that good of racing from Pocono either, from what we've seen in the past. In my opinion, though, I differ from you, Justin. I think this race was slightly better, and I think it was because of the payoff we got, seeing that fuel mileage strategy go green until the end, because if it didn't go green, I would have rated this race, I think, below the last one I had. But I give this race an 80% because, like Dom Joseph mentioned, a fuel strategy race is one of the best. It is so exciting to watch because you don't know until the end how it's going to play out, and then you see them kind of drop like flies, and it's unexpected. You don't know who's going to win at the end. Again, passing was pretty rough in this race up until the end when we saw everything kind of unfold. But that is my race rating, and I will say, actually, Justin, I don't know if you look at Jeff Gluck's race poll, and I haven't mentioned them on the show in a while, but these rated the highest Pocono races in all the times that he's done the poll. He's done 12 race polls for Pocono, and these rated the highest, followed by the 2017 race. So a pretty good job for that. And I want to know, what are your race ratings? Leave them in the comments below. And thank you all so much for listening to this episode of Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk all about the NASCAR Cup Series. Before I close out, I want to thank Justin so much for being on the show. Where can the viewers find you, Justin, outside of the show?
Well, outside of the show, you can always find me writing articles for Racing Refresh at racingrefresh.com. And you can also search mine and Zachary Bell's show, Dipstick Debates, on the Racing Refresh YouTube channel. We haven't posted in a little over a month due to some changes that we're currently working through, but we are coming back, and we are hopefully within the next week or two should have an episode posted, and we should be back on track. Other than that, you can follow me on social media at dipstick_Justin. Pretty simple right there. And yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, I hope to see Dipstick Debates back. I love watching the show. It's so much fun to hear you guys kind of duke it out on certain topics. So that's where to find Justin. Where to find me, down in the description below is my link to my Twitter page for daily NASCAR coverage. In Twitter Spaces, I do usually on Mondays following the race weekend. You can also find me over at the Podium Finish, the outlet I work for that I absolutely love. A great group there with great motorsports content. But before you click the links in the description below, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Share this with your friends and family. And while you do that, thank you all so much for listening to another episode of Above the Yellow Line. And